Good afternoon, and welcome to the Auburn Avenue Research Library's Find It Fridays. My name is Tamika Strong, and I am the Reference and Research Division Manager located on the second floor. And today we have the pleasure of learning more about census records. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So as I said before, this is welcome to the Auburn Avenue Research Library. We are a special library on African American culture and history, a special library of the Fulton County Library System on the on African American culture and history. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss to do a very high level overview of census records. In preparing for this presentation, I realized you can actually have a week-long presentation on census records and still not cover everything. So we're just going to provide you with the basics, today. And so, as I said before, we are a special library of the Fulton County Library System with a focus on African American culture and history. We are the first library of its kind in the Southeast. With this specialization, and our library offers specialized reference as well as archival collections dedicated to the study and research of African Americans, well, of people of African descent, regardless of their location in the world. So we have what's called an international collecting policy, where we collect materials regardless of where the person of African descent lived. We have materials possibly on every aspect of life. And so our collection is also unique in the sense that there are times when we're the only location in the system, in the library system in the state, as well as in the Southeast, to hold these materials. Um, we are 30 years young. Our facility started in 1994. However, we are continuing the legacy that began back in 1921 with the opening of the Auburn branch of the Carnegie Library of Atlanta, which served as the first public library branch for African Americans in the city. Our collection continues the work that was created or began in 1934 when the collection started as a Negro history collection. So our library is divided into three divisions: the program division, which is on the first floor, reference and research division, which is on the second floor, and the archives division, which resides on the third floor. So before I get into the heart of our presentation, I definitely wanted to remind you of our next upcoming presentation, which will be on Friday, November 21st at noon. It will be a discussion on entitled Seasoned Rice, a discussion of Mama's recipes. And so we know that November, the following week is actually Thanksgiving, and we know we have families will be pulling out those recipes so that they can celebrate family and legacy. And so just join us for a discussion about Mama's recipes as well as some resources so that we can showcase other recipes that we have here in the collection. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video because I realize I am looking at one screen and my video is on another screen. So we're going to stop that video. So there is a handout for the session. I'm putting that, handout in the chat. And so we're going to hop right in. So to learn more about upcoming programs and to register for our Find It Friday series, you can just go to our website, which is simply fullcoalibrary.org/AARL, or you can Google us. And so without further ado, census records. So as I said before, census records is one of those record types that you can have a 20-minute conversation about, or you can discuss it for a whole week and not fully cover every aspect of it. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to just do a very high-level overview of the census records as a record type. And so we're going to do the general overview of the census records. We're going to discuss the different types of census records. We're going to talk about where can you find them and also how to use them. So what are they? My personal definition of this record group is it's a resource created by the governments, by governments, including, other foreign governments, because they also have census records that are now being utilized by genealogists and family historians to locate ancestors and family members to place them in a place at a certain time. So we know the official definition of the census, and well, excuse me, let's talk about why they were created first, and then we'll talk about why they're useful for genealogists. So we know they weren't initially created for genealogy or with genealogists in mind. They were created back in 1787. This article, section, and clause was added to the Constitution, where they created this process through which individuals can be counted to determine representation. And so it says representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. And so essentially what this is saying is that back in 1787, this clause was established, and the first census, which was started in 1790, would be done to collect the numbers of the individuals residing in the several states within this union to determine representation. And so, as it was directed by law, the census would take place every 10 years. So, from 1790 going forward, as by law, we will be taking a census for to gather the numbers for the representation for Congress. And so, why are these tools so useful for genealogists and family historians? So, we now have established the reason why they were created. But the thing about when things are ultimately created, their initial use is one thing, but other groups come behind them and realize that this record that was created for one purpose can be extremely useful for other purposes, including tracing family history. And so we have, since 1850, details have been provided for all individuals in each household. And so the thing about the census records is that you're not going to find another resource that is going to detail every individual in a household. Now, it didn't initially start that way, but starting in 1850, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, you'll see that there is some information collected about each and every individual in each and every household. Now, if this is not fail safe, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone was actually captured, but the idea or the goal of this process was to capture information about the various individuals. And so this information that was captured includes details like the name, the age at a certain point in time, the state and country of birth, parents' birthplace, possibly the names of the individuals, the parents in the household, year of immigration, if they were immigrants, the marital status and years, the place where they live, their occupations, the value of home and personal belongings. That is just a small portion of what is included in several of those census records. And these are very important pieces of information that we as genealogists and family historians want to collect and want to know about our ancestors. And that's why the census records are considered the foundational resource for genealogists, because it gives you a great starting point into the lives of those who came before us. And in order for us to better utilize these records, we have to learn a little bit more about them so that we can utilize them to their fullest potential. And so, one thing we have to know about the census records are the census days, or the dates in which that were established as the census day in history. And so, with the way that the census records were collected, they were initially collected by marshals, and then it went to people who were hired to be enumerators. And so, they were charged with the task of collecting this information. And so, there was a day designated for each census record as the census day. And so, from 1790 to 1820, it was the first Monday in August. From 1830 to 1880, and then back in 1900, June 1st was designated as a census day. The 1890 census, June 2nd was that day. 1910, April 15th. 1920, January 1st. And 1930 to 1950 is April 1st. So since the 1930s, April 1st has been that designated day that has been a census day for them to start collecting the census. And you may wonder why this information is so important. It's important because whenever they establish the census day, whatever information is collected has to be true as if it was that day. And so, one example of that is in 1940, if you look at the top of the 1940 census, you'll see this included in the information on the form. It is name of each person whose usual place of residence on April 1st, 1940 was in this household. So essentially what that is saying is that if the person was this was the usual place of residence on April 1st, then their name should be listed. And so if the person was alive on April 1st, but they died April 2nd, their name still should show up on the census because that's where their usual place of residence was on that date before they passed away. So there are going to be cases where you have a person who was born later on in the census year, and maybe the census taker had not arrived to that location. Say, for instance, the census day in 1940 is April 1st, but the census taker didn't get to their location till, say, May 1st. So if the baby was born April 28th, as opposed to March 28th, even though the child is in the household and is there at the time that the enumerator arrived, the child was not there on April 1st. So whatever information is listed should be true on April 1st. And so, as I said, we're looking at the top of a 1940 census record from Atlanta, Fulton County, Georgia. And so on the other side at the top, you'll see something that shows the enumeration district, maybe the state district number. I'm not sure what the SD means, but I think it might be state. But then you'll also see the date in which the census was enumerated. So on the second line here, it says enumerated by me on April 18th, 1940. And then this is the name of the enumerator. Then also it has the sheet number here. And so one of the things that you really want to do when you're researching and utilizing census records is that you want to read the whole document. I know we get tunnel vision and we want to just start at the line that has the name of our research subject, but we really have to slow down and take a step back and not only look at the line that the individual is on and also the household in which that person is living, but we also have to take some time to look at the people living next door, the people who are their neighbors, and also the information at the top. And then we also need to read it across. But we will look at some of those examples a little bit later. So there are several types of census records. The one that we typically talk about as a census is what's called the free population schedules. But there are so many different other types of census records, and we're going to briefly discuss each of those listed on the screen. So first we have the state census records. So there are several states that created their own census records that happened between the federal census years. So if you're lucky enough to have a state that did a census in between the federal census years, that means that you could possibly have, in the case of Florida, which has a 1935 census, so you can have a 1930 federal census, 1935 Florida state census, and then a 1940 federal census. And I think Florida also has a 1945 census. So essentially, what that does is it helps you to um, find your person in between census years, because we know 10 years is a long time for many things to happen. And so sometimes it really does help when you have a state that provided a census record for certain years, that you can help kind of fill the holes or provide some missing information utilizing those records. And so some of the information collected in the state census is similar to information collected in the federal census. So you will have to review those just to get a sense of what information is included. And some of these are available online. So here is a screenshot of a search of the collections in Ancestry Library Edition. And the search term that I used was state census and the asterisk. The asterisk allows for, wow, is one of the pieces of one of the, excuse me, it is used for wildcard searching. And so it allows you to replace certain letters up to, and I think with the asterisk, up to 6 letters. And so if there's any variation of census, so it can be census with the ES or census without the ES, so it will pull all those variations so that it will show all of those regardless of what happens after the second S in census. And so as you can see, there are collections for Alabama. There's Albany, New York State Census. There's a state census from California in 1852. Colorado has one in 1885, which is right before 1890, which is pretty good. But then there are others. So like there are several state censuses that are here, including the ones for Florida. So depending upon your research location, you definitely want to check to see whether or not your state has a state census. And so on the handout, there is actually a link to some resources that have state census lists so that you can review those as well. And so I just added the link just in case someone came after the link was posted before. So the next group of census records we're going to discuss are the non-population schedules. And the non-population schedules really are special schedules that have been taken for certain years. So they are not, they don't go the full run, if you will, of the census records from 1790 to 1950. They are only here for special times or special years. And so some examples of those are the agricultural schedules, which contains information on every farm with annual produce worth over $100 or more. So if you are researching individuals who own farms or who are tenant farmers or sharecroppers, this may be a resource you definitely want to learn more about and learn how to utilize those to gain as much information from them as you can. The mortality schedules is a really interesting resource because it contains information on individuals who died 12 months immediately prior to the census date. So whatever the census date was for 1850, 12 months immediately before that, if anyone passed away, the information should be recorded in the mortality schedules. And so the mortality schedules actually happens 1850, 60, 70, and 1880. So there are about 4 years of mortality schedules for certain locations. And so this is another resource that you may want to take a look at, especially if you're researching individuals who may have disappeared. They do include enslaved individuals for 1850 and 1860. So that is another resource for those who are tracing enslaved individuals to review so that they can see whether or not one of their ancestors may have been included. And speaking of slave schedules or the enslaved, the infamous slave schedules are only for 1850 and 1860s, and they do not list the enslaved individuals by name, but they do provide a listing of the slave holders, / agents, and information about the enslaved, including their race, their age, their gender. And in some cases, if the person and the instructions were if the enslaved individual was over 100 years old, they will be listed by name. But there are at least one case that I know of, and I can't remember the location. I think it's in Tennessee, where the enumerator didn't follow instructions, and so the names of the individuals are also listed. But that is neat on a haystack because that was a special random um, situation. So that is not true for the large majority of these records, but they are still useful to help you to learn more about those individuals who were the slaveholders or the agents of the slaveholders in your research location. There are also the the social statistics schedules, which don't does not provide information on the individuals, but it provides snapshots of information um, about the communities in which the ancestors lived. But then there's also the manufacturing slash industrial schedules that happened between 1810 and roughly 1870, and it contains information on businesses. So if your ancestor or research subject was into business, this may be maybe an additional resource for you to consult. And so, like for the free population schedules or the state census, there are some that are included in Ancestry Library Edition. And the way in which they have it, the collection title is U.S. Selected Federal Census Non-Population Schedules 1850 to 1880. And so you can actually browse a collection by state, which I use Georgia as an example. And you can see that there are at least four different schedule types listed here. But I know they also have the mortality schedules on Ancestry, so I'm not sure why they're not included here, but they are listed there. And so, in addition to the non population schedules, there are other census records. And so, as I said before, there are so many different subgroups of census records that you can spend a whole week talking about just the census. But there are territory censuses, which are enumerations for individuals living in the territories prior to statehood. So, like the Colorado Territory, the Mississippi Territory, those kind of territories. There's also the special census records for Native Americans, and that includes the various roles and some other special ones that were created as a part of the US federal census. And then there are also the veteran schedules. And so, as I said before, there are a lot of resources that are on your handout that includes information about these resources. And so hopefully you will find that information useful. So now we're going to go and turn our attention to the free population schedules. And as I said before, they started in 1790 and they happen every 10 years. And the information recorded on the census records vary from year to year. So one of the resources that is included in your handout, which is pictured here, not the handout, but the resource, is called Measuring America, the decennial censuses from 1790 to 2000. This is an amazing resource because it not only provides information about each of the census records, it also provides the questions that are asked. So it's a document, a PDF document that's over 100 pages. But if you're interested in learning more details about the census record as a record group, then this is definitely one of those resources that you would need to review. So, moving from 1790 to 1840, those censuses only captured the heads of household. They're the only ones, they are the only census records that capture only the heads of household by name. The other individuals in the household are listed as tick marks by gender, age, and race. Starting in 1850, that's when all the individuals or all the members of the household were listed individually. And so it provided information on an individual level as opposed to a household level. So the individual became the focal point of the information as opposed to just information about the household. And so from 1850, we moved to 1870, which is a pivotal year when you're doing African American genealogy because this is the first federal census that most African Americans were listed by name. Now, there were free persons of color, and they were listed in the census starting in 1790 on up to 1870. But 1870 is the first federal census following the end of the Civil War and emancipation. And so, this is the first time that most African Americans were listed by name. In 1880, that's when they started showing the family relationships. 1890 is the only census record that we don't have because it was lost to water damage due to a fire. There are some very minuscule parts of that record that survive, but for the large part of the country, we have to use 1890 census substitutes like tax digest and other records because the information that was contained in the census was lost due to fire damage. In 1900, the census included the birth month and date. And with a lot of the information in the census, you have to take it with a grain of salt, use it as a starting point, but it may not be fully correct. And we'll talk more about that later. 1940 is the census to date that denotes the informant with an asterisk, a little X in a circle, if you will. And so that lets you know who provided the information to the enumerator. So 1950 census is the most recent one that we have available to us, which was released in April 2022. And the 1960 census will be released in about a few more years in April 2032. And so the reason why there's a delay in terms of sharing this information with the public or with the release of the census is that it has a 72-year privacy is released every 72 years for privacy reasons. And so the next one, like I said, will be available April 2032. And so I imagine that the release of this one will be even easier than a release of the 1950 census due to technology. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens next. So, where do you find a census record? So, we've talked a little bit about them. We talked about the types. And so, now where can you find them? There are several places where you can find the census records. And there are several of these resources available through the Fulton County Library System. That includes Ancestry Library Edition, Fold 3 Library Edition, which is also available through Fulton County, as well as My Heritage. My Heritage is one of the newest additions to the offerings for genealogy databases through Galileo. And so that recently came on board in the last few months. And so many of us are still getting used to this resource, but it is another resource that is available from home remotely that you can utilize to search the census. There's also Family Search, which is a free resource that is available online. You have to register with your account with your email. And so once you register for an account, you can access the resources available through Family Search wherever you have access to the internet. And then there's some locations on site that if you don't have access to Ancestry, you can come on site to several locations, including all the public libraries in the state of Georgia. They have access to Ancestry Library Edition. So all you would need to do is go into one of their facilities. And featured here is our Central Library of Fulton County Library System. And you can log on to their wireless network, to their Wi-Fi, and then you can get access to the databases listed here, including Ancestry. Of the databases listed here, Ancestry Library Edition is the only one that's not available from home. So you would have to come on site to either Central or any public library in the state to access it. You can also go to other institutions like the Georgia Archives down in Morrow to utilize this resource as well. So I just wanted to share a few research tips with you while you are preparing to do the census research. You want to start from the latest census and work backwards. So you want to work from what you know back to what you don't know. And so even if you have a person who was born in 1880 and they died in 1960, you want to start looking for them in the 1950 census because that information is more recent, if you will. And so by working backwards, you are able to create a paper trail and add additional clues or individuals so that you'll know that the people you're researching are actually the people you are supposed to be researching. So, because there are a lot of people who have the same names and possibly the same wife's name and possibly even the same birth year and the same location. So you really want to try to have as much information as you can to make sure that the person you're researching is actually the person that you're interested in. You also want to use multiple sites when you're searching the census because of the way in which the census records were transcribed. Some of them may not be correct. So if you're looking for a person and you can't find them in Ancestry, try Family Search. If you can't find them in Family Search, try My Heritage because it could just be the way that the name was spelled by the transcriber or the OCR, which is the character recognition software that is being utilized. And so maybe they read it wrong. And so by using multiple sites, hopefully you'll be able to find your person. And then you can go back to the original site to see if you can locate them by the additional information that you find out in the other site. You always want to look at the original document, not just a transcript, because a transcription could be wrong. You really want to look at the original document. And if you cannot read cursive, that's going to be a problem because these original records are in cursive. And even for those of us who can read cursive, sometimes the handwriting is so bad you can barely make it out. But the more you work on these records and the more that you review them, the um, more you will be able to um, decipher the information contained within them. So just remember, if you remember anything else, just always look at the original document. Also, when you are finding these records, please make sure to make a copy for yourself, download it to your computer or make a copy, physical copy, because we know even though Ancestry is pretty consistent database, um, sometimes what's there today can be gone tomorrow. So you definitely want to make sure that you make copies of all the documents that you find for your records. And make sure to read the full census record. Don't just focus on the line that your person is on. Try to get a full sense of the information contained in that full document. You want to analyze the information because it may lead you to additional resources, like you may learn that a person owns a home. So home ownership that translate into deed records. If you see the notation in some senses where it says M2, so the person is married and this is their second marriage. So if this is their second marriage, who was the first wife? What happened to dissolve the first marriage? So that will take you or lead you to additional marriage records. So you also want to remember to look at the neighbors. Sometimes they're family members. You might have the child and their spouse and their children living right next door to the grandmother and maybe even a sibling, that kind of thing. So you want to definitely look at the people or the neighbors surrounding the household that your research subject shows up in. And just be mindful that the ages may not be accurate. Some women may be the same age across 4 different census records because sometimes when the enumerator goes to the house, they may not be the intended person may not be there. So they may have to ask the next door neighbor. And if the next door neighbor knows this person as their nickname and don't really know their age, but they kind of guess, that's what's going to be recorded in the census. So that's why it's important to be mindful of the nicknames as well as the name abbreviations, because when you think about it, they are recording all of this information by hand. So in some cases, they're going to use the name abbreviations for some of the names. So, like one example of that is JNO, which is the abbreviation for John. You have William, which is WM. You have James, which is JAS, and you have some others. And so you want to kind of be familiar with those name abbreviations of the names of your ancestors or your research subjects. You also want to be mindful of the nicknames. So the person name, full name could be Margaret, but they're nicknamed Maggie. They could be Lizzie, but they could be Elizabeth. They could be Maggie, but maybe listed as Mag. So you want to be mindful of those different variations with the names, but also be flexible with the spelling of the surnames. Because Callaway, in my research, has been spelled at least 5 different ways. So, with that, you want to be creative, you want to be flexible in whatever iteration or various spellings that you uncover in your research. You want to make a list of these so that you can test them out depending upon whatever database you're utilizing. And then also, you want to utilize the wildcards. So, we talked about the asterisk, which represents or can be substituted for multiple letters. But if you're trying to just search for the different variations of one letter in a certain placement in the name, you can use a question mark. And so those are some of the searching tips that might be helpful when you're doing this research. Also, don't get discouraged when you see a different spelling or a different year for your ancestors. Some people are turned off by this. They are determined that the person's name is Smith, spelled Smith, but it could be Smythe. But that could be their ancestor. But because they're so focused on it being spelled the modern day spelling of Smith, that they ignore the other clues that might be present. Or they might see the person there and their birth year is wrong. And they're so determined that their birth year is 1920 when they see 1919. Still look at the record just to see if it could be your person. That's why it's important to have some additional clues to kind of help you differentiate between this research subject and somebody else who may be very close. And so, if you're having problems locating individuals in the census, you may want to try searching just using the first name or even just the surname so you can see a full list of all the Smiths in Morgan County, Georgia. Now, I wouldn't recommend that because there's some surnames that are very, very popular, like Smith, Williams, Johnson, and as genealogists, when we see that, we're like groaning because there are just so many people with that name. So you really have to work a little bit harder to find information about those ancestors. So when you're preparing to do this research, my recommendation is that you find an ancestor who lived before 1940 or 1950. And I say both of those because I'm having a hard time myself locating one of my research subjects in 1950, but I can find her in 1940. And so that's why it's always good to kind of have somebody who can cover both. And so you also want to know where the ancestor was living around that time so that you'll know where to look. You want to have a list of or knowledge of the family unit, their parents, their siblings, their children, their spouse, all of those individuals, because that helps you to narrow down um, who you're looking for. And then when you have that list, that can help you confirm that, okay, they are not where I thought they should be, but these are all the people who should be in the household. And then also, you want to set a research goal for that person. So, research goals attempt to help you stay focused on your research. And so, an example of a research goal is this. I like to do both a long-term goal as well as a short-term goal because the short-term goal keeps you motivated to work towards the long-term goal. Now, this goal back in the day before the age of digitization and keyword searching may have taken a very long time, but now we can utilize resources like Ancestry, Family Search, and others, and we're able to locate this information much more quickly. So, thankfully, we are in that age right now because I've heard that there were times when it would take months to locate people in the census. And so, thankfully, we're at a time where it doesn't take that long. But for me, my short term goal is to find census records for my maternal grandmother. And my long term goal is to trace that maternal line back to 1870. And so, one example that I would like to share is for my maternal grandmother, Miss Maggie Bell Prenup Swinger Maddox. And I put all that information because it's a note to me that lets me know that she was married twice. I'll also list her life range. So, she was born in 1928 and she died in 2000. And I have a list of her members of her family unit. I have a list of her children. This is her mother, her father, stepfather, her grandparents, and her siblings as well. So I'm armed with all of this information. So now I can actually create what I call a census checklist, which is the basis of a timeline. So you can do this for your research subjects as well. And so what you would do is you would have the person's full name, as much of the name as you know. And then you will have, I'm sorry, I'm pointing here and like you guys can see it. You have the person's full name or as much of the name that you know. Then you have the person's birth year and their death year. And so once you have that information, you can actually create what I call the census checklist and the foundation of the timeline, because you can list, okay, 1928 is her birth, 2000 is her death. So between those years, what are the census records I should, and I say should because sometimes people are not listed, but I should be able to find her in 1930, 1940, and 1950. But if I'm working backwards, I would say I should be able to find her in 1950, 1940, and then 1930. Okay. So, armed with this checklist, I now should be able to go and do some research on her. So, one of the things I do recommend is when I'm doing this session, I like practical learning. And so, what I would recommend that you do when you have time is when you're trying to do your census research, select a research subject, create a census checklist for them so that you can kind of focus your research efforts. Now, there may be additional records that you may learn about after you do this research, but this can be the foundation of your research for that particular person. So, in the next 10 minutes, I want to go over how do you find these databases on the Fulton County Library website, and then do a quick demo if I can. So, how do you find it? So, the way that you start this is that you go to our Fulton County website, which is fulcolibrary.org. Then you're going to click on services. Once you click on services, you're going to see a drop down which will display digital library. And so once you get there, you're going to click digital library. And then from there on the right, you're going to click by subject. And then after that, you're going to click genealogy, because one of the things that we as an institution did was we realized that genealogy is a very popular topic. And so we wanted to kind of pull together all the genealogy related databases in one place to make it easier for our researchers to find. And so once you click on genealogy, you're going to see a listing of the genealogy databases. So Ancestry, of course, since it starts with an A, it's going to be the very first one. There in the screen, you can actually see Fold 3. But if you scroll down, you can also see some of the others, including My Heritage. So this is a place where you would go to get access to the resources, the genealogy resources. But just remember that Ancestry is only available in-house in the library only. So you will see, if you're logging in from home, you'll see Fold 3, you'll see the others. You may even see Ancestry Library Edition, but you won't be able to access it. So once you get to Ancestry, you definitely don't want to start on the right. That's why I have that big red X, because you will be frustrated if you're just trying to do research. So you want to start on the left where it says begin searching. And once you go there, then it will take you to the search page. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up the website so that we can do a very quick demo so I can walk you through it. So let's see, what are you seeing? Okay, so I'm just going to pull this out, put it here. All right, so you should be able to see the screen. So as I said before, this is the Fulco Library website. Click Services, Digital Library. Then once you get to Digital Library, you click by subject, then genealogy. And I'm just going to scroll down just so you can see, excuse me, the other databases that are available. And so as you can see at the very end is the new one, MyHeritage Library Edition. And so if you haven't played around with MyHeritage, this is a good opportunity to do so because you can log in from home and you can navigate through that new resource. So once you click on Ancestry Library Edition, it's going to bring you to this screen. Remember to start on the left. And when you click begin searching, you can do keyword searches here, but I just want to show you this feature on the right as well as this one right here. So if you just want to focus on census records, like this search is a global search, which means that you're searching every collection that's keyword searchable. But if you wanted to kind of narrow your focus to one particular record type, you can actually go into different categories on the right. You can click on Census Voter List, which is going to take you to another screen that has a search box. But when you're searching, you're only searching census and voter lists. So you can search that way. Or if you want to if you want to narrow that down even more so, you can just focus on the U.S. federal census collection, especially if you're not doing any international research. So if you just wanted to do the U.S. federal census collection, you can do this search box here and it will search in all of these data collections. But if you wanted to go to a specific census year, like say for instance, you want to play around with the veteran schedules, you can click on this link and it will take you to that page for that database. You can even browse it, so you can click on state. So it doesn't look like Georgia's there at all, but I think I remember them saying something about there's some states that are missing. And so the thing about the databases is that sometimes you may have to read through the about section so that you can see what type of information is included, because it could just be that it doesn't include your state. That's the reason why you're not finding the person for it in when you search in there. And so this information is actually linked on your website. I mean, excuse me, on your handout, because the source, which is a sort of kind of like a huge resource for genealogy, is available online. The only issue with the online version now is that it has a lot of ads, but the information is still very much valid. And so going back, that is how you can search on a record type, or you can search by the collection. But then if you click up here where it says search, you can actually go to the card catalog. That's also that view all. Let's go back home. Well, we go here. So if you click on view all, you'll be able to search the card catalogs. So if you type in state census here, like I did before with the asterisk, then it's going to pull up all of the state census records that are available. And these are listed actually alphabetically, which is interesting. So you can utilize those resources there. And so if I just wanted to go back here and I wanted to click on all collections and I wanted to search for Miss Maggie, and I have to warn you, I know that she's not in there by this name, but because I was able to add some additional information from the personal account of Ancestry, it does show up when you do a search for her by name. So this is her in 1930, which is the first one that she shows up in, or she should be in. And so this right here in the center is the transcription, and it gives you just an idea about what information is contained on there. But if you click on the thumbnail on the left, this is the actual census record. So you'll see at the very top that there's information about it. So this census, we remember that the census date is April 1st for 1930, but this information was collected on April 15th by Gary Chinney. And so now we can go down and we can see, if you wanted to see, this is the different columns. So it's a good idea to kind of read the column headers so that you can have an understanding about what information is being captured. And one of the great things about Ancestry is that if you hover over a category, it will tell you what it is. And then at the top, it still has the information about the column. And so with Ancestry, they also have um, this highlighting feature where they highlight the household, but also in yellow, they put the person who you are researching. So this is my research subject, Miss Maggie Bell. She is listed as granddaughter. And then she's a female, she's Negro, she's 1 and 11 months. So she's 23 months old and she's single. And so this, provides us information about, has she attended school? No, because she's a baby. Can she read or write? It's left blank. So no, she cannot. But above her, which is her uncle, he can read or write. He had not attended school. Her birthplace is Georgia. Father and mother's birthplace, Georgia. I'm not sure what this code is. There are a lot of codes in the census, and there's actually a resource on your handout that helps with that. But it also provides some additional information like occupations, the industry, some additional codes, the worker class, employed, unemployment schedule. This census is the one that talks about whether or not the person was a veteran. And so um, if the person is a veteran, they then list what war it was, which will lead you to military records. But then if there was a farmer, this would actually point you to the agricultural schedule or the farm schedule. I'm sorry, the farm schedule, which will provide you with more information. So that's why it's important to not just focus on the first few columns of the census, that you read all the way across to learn as much as you can about um, those individuals that you're researching. And so I wanted to make you aware of two resources that I found extremely helpful in while I was preparing for this presentation. So there's this one, sorry, that it provides a lot of great information. I have a copy and I had not ever really taken the time to read it, but it's very helpful information in there. It provides a lot of historical information as well. One other resource you may want to look at is also on your handout. It's a family tree. Um, Let me see if I can pull it up. I'm sorry. The family tree fact book. And I like this one simply because it provides you with a lot of great information and in a few pages. And so that one is very helpful as well. And so the source, which is also on your handout, it is online full text. And this is where you can go to learn more about the census records. But like I said, it has a lot of ads, but the information is top notch. This has been a long surveying resource that genealogists have used. And so on the right here, you'll see that there's additional resources there. But then, of course, there is the National Archives Census website, which is a good resource as well. So that is also on your handout. So we actually have 3 minutes left, and I want to stop sharing and see if you have any questions. So, Cassandra, I see your question, and there's the link. And if you can't access it, please let me know. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. You're welcome. Hopefully, this was some helpful information to kind of get you started with the census. Like I said, this is a very high level general overview, but there are several resources in your handout that is extremely helpful. Definitely look at, and I do recommend the resource that is listed at the bottom on the last page. It's called Mine in the Census, and it's a two volume or a two-part video. And I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry. And so I don't know if you've heard about Roots Tech, but Roots Tech is an annual event that really brings people from all over the world to Salt Lake City. But since COVID, they've had a online version of it where they have presenters to do online sessions. And so Robin Smith is one who is, I found to be a very good presenter. And so she has a two-part series called Mine in the Census. And I think if you want to do a deeper dive, she is a great resource for that information. And she is pretty knowledgeable. And so I sat and I watched it and got some ideas for this presentation from hers. So I would recommend you reviewing her sessions, both of which, because I have to look at the second one myself. But this is a really good resource, and there are several others on here that are helpful as well. Like for instance, the second option under video resources that's entitled "Extract U.S. Census Data into Excel." So if you're at the point where you're needing to kind of really mine the census records for a certain location, the steps in which are listed in that presentation by Connie Knox is really helpful. And it doesn't really take very long. And if you're familiar with Google Sheets or Excel, you can create a spreadsheet with the information from the census rather quickly. And so, if there are no additional questions, I want to be mindful and respectful of your time and want to say thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon to learn more about census records. Our next Find It Friday will take place on Friday, November the 21st, and it will be seasoned rice, a discussion of mom's recipes, and will take place at 12. And so the recording of this event will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And so if you're curious about or interested in seeing some of our previous presentations, I can show you how to get to those really quickly. So if you head over to our website, which is Auburn Avenue Research Library, you can scroll down to, where is it? YouTube, and you can click on the link there. And there you will find a created playlist on the Find It Fridays instructional series, where the majority of those are listed. I realize I have to get one added. So there's one that's not there, but they will both be uploaded within the next week or so. So thank you again for participating, and I hope that you will enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great day.